To his right waited 3 stiff-backed men in gray suits, the Union railmen. "Ah, Mrs. Holloway," Crow called loudly, ensuring the entire lobby heard him. "Have you come to settle your debt? Let's see." He checked the clock. 11:55. "You've got 5 minutes." May stepped forward. From her pocket, she drew a silver pocket watch and her wedding ring, placing them gently on the polished wood. "The watch is solid silver," she said, her voice unsteady but proud. "The ring is gold. Bargaining time is over." The scratch of the pen echoed like thunder in the hushed room. "Time's up," Crow snapped. "Marshal, escort her out. Gentlemen, prepare the deed." Marshal Boone stepped forward, resting a careful hand on May's shoulder. "Come on, May," he murmured. "Don't let him see you break." Tears burned her eyes as she gripped the desk edge. "You're a thief, Silas," she said hoarsely. "You're stealing my life." "I'm a businessman," Crow replied coolly. "And business is cruel." His pen hovered over the foreclosure papers. Slam! The bank's double doors burst open so violently the glass rattled in its frame. Every head snapped around. Sunlight flooded the lobby, blinding and fierce, outlining a lone figure in the doorway. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, dust-caked from the trail. A long canvas duster hung open, revealing a pearl-handled Colt .45 resting easy at his hip. His hat sat low, eyes hidden, jaw carved from stone. He said nothing. He simply walked. Thud, clink, thud, clink. Spurs struck hardwood with slow, deliberate rhythm. The crowd parted before him as if by instinct, like water before a blade. May stepped back, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had never seen this man before. He was terrifying. The stranger didn't look at her. He didn't acknowledge the marshal. He walked straight to the raised platform where Silas Crow sat frozen, ink drying on the quill. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy canvas sack. He dropped it onto the desk. The impact shook the inkwell. What is this?" Crow stammered, his confidence cracking. "Count it," the man said. His voice was low, deep as thunder rolling through a canyon. Crow hesitated, then loosened the cords. Gold spilled free. Heavy U.S. double eagles clattered across the mahogany, spinning, flashing, settling into a brilliant heap. The Union railmen gasped. A murmur rippled through the room like wind through dry grass. 3,200, the stranger said calmly, and 50 more for the interest. Silas Crow's hands trembled as his fingers brushed the coins. They were real, heavy, unmistakable. It was more money than the bank's vault had seen in years. Who are you?" Crow whispered, his face drained of color. "The account is settled," the man cut in. "Issue the receipt to May Holloway." Paid in full, May's knees nearly gave way. She stared at his profile. A thin scar traced down his cheek, half hidden beneath rough stubble. He looked dangerous, like a man shaped by violence and long roads. Why would someone like him do this? "Sir," May breathed, barely louder than a prayer. "I don't understand." The stranger never looked at her. His gaze stayed locked on Crow. "The receipt," he repeated, his hand drifting just close enough to his holster to make the threat clear. Crow scrambled. He grabbed a sheet of paper, scribbled furiously, stamped it with shaking hands, then slid it across the desk. "There," he squeaked. "The debt is cleared. The ranch belongs to her." The stranger took the paper. Then, finally, he turned toward May. For a heartbeat, she met his eyes. Steel gray, sharp, calculating, but not cruel. He held the receipt out. When she took it, Her fingers brushed the worn leather of his glove. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He only tipped the brim of his hat, a quiet gesture of respect that felt strange coming from a man like him. Then turned away. He walked back down the aisle, leaving gold scattered across the banker's desk. No one spoke. The room seemed frozen in awe. He pushed through the doors and vanished into the blinding sunlight. May jolted back to herself. She clutched the receipt to her chest and ran. "Wait!" she cried, bursting onto the boardwalk. He was already mounting the massive black gelding, swinging into the saddle with the ease of a man born on horseback. "Wait!" May ran into the street and seized the bridle. The horse sidestepped, restless, but the stranger steadied him with a firm hand. "You paid my debt," she said, squinting up at him beneath the harsh sun. "That was a fortune. Who are you? What do you want in return? I have nothing left." He looked down at her. The shadow of his hat hid most of his face, but she saw his jaw tighten. "I didn't ask for anything, ma'am," he said, "and I won't." "But nobody does that," May insisted, desperation breaking through. "Nobody gives away their life savings. Did you know Elias? Did my husband send you?" His grip on the reins tightened. The leather creaked. "Your husband is dead, Mrs. Holloway," he said flatly. "Go back to your ranch. Raise your cattle. Mend your fences." "But I need your name," she shouted as he turned the horse. He paused. He looked back, not at her, but toward the mountains where dark storm clouds were gathering. "Name's Cole," he said. "Cole Rourke." Then he drove his spurs in. The horse surged forward, and he disappeared into a curtain of dust, leaving May standing in the street with a paid mortgage in her hands, and 1,000 questions burning in her chest. She looked down at the paper. It was real. She was safe. Yet as the dust settled where Cole Rourke had vanished, a chill crept along her spine. She knew that name. Elias had whispered it once in his sleep, 2 nights before he died. He had whispered it with fear. The ride back to the Double Bar S was the longest of May Holloway's life. The triumph she'd felt inside the bank drained away, replaced by a deep, gnawing unease. The sky, bruised purple all afternoon, finally tore open. The rain didn't fall. It slammed down. A freezing high plains downpour turned the trail into slick mud. May hunched on the wagon's seat, rain soaking through her shawl, plastering her hair to her cheeks. She barely felt the cold. Her mind replayed Elias's voice from months earlier, whispered in the darkness of their bedroom. "If anything happens, if the past comes knocking, run, May. Don't ask questions. Just run from anyone named Rourke." And now a man carrying that very name had bought her salvation. By the time the wagon creaked beneath the ranch archway, night had swallowed the land. The house stood dark and silent against the storm. No fire in the chimney, no light in the windows. Just the hollow outline of a life she was struggling to keep from collapsing. She unhitched the horses with numb hands and led them into the barn. She rubbed them dry with old sacks, murmuring soft apologies for the brutal ride. They were the only living souls who still listened to her now. As May latched the barn door and turned toward the house, she froze. Through the curtain of driving rain, nearly a quarter-mile out near the bend in the creek where the cottonwoods clustered thick, she saw a flicker, faint, orange, a fragile spark fighting the darkness. Fire. Someone was camped on her land. May didn't step inside to warm herself. She climbed onto the porch, the soaked boards groaning beneath her boots, and reached above the doorframe. Her fingers closed around the cold steel of the Winchester rifle. She checked the chamber. Loaded. She didn't bother changing out of her rain-soaked clothes. Instead, she stepped back into the mud, the rifle tucked tight beneath her arm to keep the powder dry. Rain whipped her face, but her jaw stayed locked. This was her land. She had nearly lost it to a banker that morning. She wasn't about to lose it to a man tonight. Elias had taught her how to move through brush without snapping a twig. She moved the same way now. As she neared the cottonwoods, the smell of wood smoke blended with wet sage. Beneath the heavy canopy, beside a rough canvas lean-to, sat Cole Rourke. He wasn't asleep. He sat on a fallen log, calmly peeling an apple with a knife sharp enough to split bone. His black hat was tipped back, and the firelight traced the scar along his cheek, carving it deep like a canyon cut by years of wind. Nearby, his massive black gelding stood tethered, head down, grazing peacefully on rain-dark grass. May stepped into the fire's glow, rifle raised. "You're trespassing, Mr. Rourke." Cole didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. He sliced off a piece of apple, speared it with the blade, and lifted it to his mouth. He chewed slowly, eyes fixed on the flames. "It's a wet night to be pointing guns at folks, Mrs. Holloway," he said calmly, his voice barely rising above the rain. "You're shivering." "I asked you a question," May said, stepping closer. The rifle never wavered. "You paid my debt. You rode off. And now you're camping on my creek. Why?" Cole finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable, reflecting firelight like still water. He wiped the blade on his pant leg and slid it back into its sheath. Horse threw a shoe about a mile back. It was a lie. They both knew it. The black gelding stood solid on all four hooves. The storm cracked overhead. "A man's got to sleep somewhere," he added. "There's a hotel in town." "I don't like towns," Cole muttered. "Too many ears, too many questions." "I have questions," May snapped. "You knew my husband. You knew Elias." Cole lifted a tin cup from a stone near the fire and poured coffee from a battered pot. Steam curled into the cold night, thick with the scent of chicory. He held the cup toward her. "Drink. You're turning blue." May hesitated. Pride told her to refuse, to demand answers instead. But her body betrayed her, shaking hard from the cold. She lowered the rifle slightly and accepted the cup with trembling fingers. Warmth spread through her hands as she took a sip. It was bitter, scalding, and the best thing she had tasted in months. "Elias and I," Cole said, poking the fire with a stick, sparks bursting into the wet leaves. "We rode together. Long before he met you. Before he became a rancher." May narrowed her eyes. "You mean the war?" "The war," Cole said, his voice hardening. "And after, we were partners. We prospected in Arizona, ran security for stage lines in Nevada." "He never mentioned you," May whispered. "He told me everything." Cole let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Mrs. Holloway, no man tells his wife everything. Elias was a good man in the end, but he had a past. We both did." May swallowed. "Why did he fear your name?" "He had nightmares," she continued. "He whispered your name like you were a ghost coming to haunt him." Cole went still. The fire cracked softly between them. When he looked at her again, something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, maybe regret, maybe anger. "Maybe I am a ghost," he said quietly. "Or maybe Elias just had a guilty conscience." "Guilty about what?" May pressed. Cole rose to his feet. He towered over her now, his shadow stretching long against the cottonwood trunk. The air tightened, thick enough to choke on. "That debt is paid, May," he said evenly. He said her name then, May, for the first time. The sound of it landed heavy between them. Intimate. Dangerous. "The slate's clean," Cole said quietly. "Don't go digging up graves. You might not like what you find buried with the bodies." "I'm not afraid of the truth," May shot back, though her heart was pounding hard enough to bruise her ribs. "You should be," Cole replied. He turned away, dragging his boot through the dirt and kicking soil over the fire's edge, dulling the flames until they hissed low. "Go back to the house. Lock your door. I'll be gone by sunrise." May stood there a long moment, the warmth of the tin cup in her hands, rain soaking her back, night pressing close. She wanted to shout at him, to shake him until every secret spilled free. But there was a wall around Cole Rourke, built from silence, scars, and years that refused to be spoken aloud. At last, she turned and walked back into the darkness, leaving him by the creek. She didn't look back. Yet, as she stepped into her empty house and slid the bolt into place, one truth settled deep in her bones. Cole Rourke would not be gone by sunrise, and she wasn't sure whether that frightened her or brought relief. May woke to the sound of hammering. A steady, deliberate rhythm echoed through the timber walls of the ranch house. She jerked upright, disoriented. The storm had passed. Sunlight sliced through the curtain seams, bright, unforgiving. She threw off the quilt, pulled on her boots, splashed cold water on her face, and reached for the rifle out of pure habit. Then she flung open the front door. She stopped cold. Cole Rourke was still there, on her porch. He'd shed his duster coat. A faded blue work shirt clung tight across his broad back. He knelt on the sagging steps, nails clenched between his teeth, hammer rising and falling with clean precision. The same steps that had been broken for 2 years. The same ones Elias had promised, every Sunday, to fix someday. Cole didn't look up. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The nails sank flush in a single practiced strike. "I thought you said sunrise," May said, her voice rough with sleep. Cole spat the nails into his palm. Horses still lame. He didn't even try to make the lie sound convincing this time. "And I noticed a loose board. A woman living alone shouldn't have to worry about breaking her neck on her own porch." "I don't need your charity, Mr. Rourke," May snapped. "You've done enough." "It ain't charity," he said, finally lifting his head. In the daylight, he looked older. Gray threaded his temples. Deep lines cut the corners of his eyes, marks left by years spent squinting into sun and danger. "I hate broken things," he said. He gestured with the hammer toward the leaning fences, the sagging barn roof. "And this place?" He exhaled. "It's broken." May felt heat creep into her face. "We did the best we could. Bad luck comes and runs." "Luck's for gamblers," Cole muttered. He rose and tested the step with his boot. It held firm. "Preparations for ranchers," he added. "Your south fence is down nearly 100 yards. Your cattle will wander into the canyon if it's not fixed by noon." May's eyes widened. The south fence, rotted posts, stretched wire. The storm must have finished it off. That pasture was her best ground. If the herd slipped into the canyon, she'd never bring them back alone. It was a maze of shale, drop-offs, and death. "I have to go," she said, rushing past him toward the barn. "I already saddled the horses," Cole called. She stopped and turned. "Horses?" "Plural," he said. "You can't string wire alone, not in this mud." He strode past her toward the barn, long steps full of purpose. "I'll drive the wagon with the posts. You ride point." "I didn't hire you," May shouted after him. "Good thing," he called back without slowing. "You couldn't afford me." The work was brutal. Mud sucked at their boots, thick and clinging. The sun burned overhead, turning the wet ground into a steaming haze. For hours they barely spoke. Only the groan of the wire stretcher, the snip-snap of pliers, the grunt of muscle pushed to its limit. May watched Cole work. He was ruthless in his efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation. He dug post holes with a tireless rhythm, driving steel into earth like it was a battle meant to be won. Elias had always complained about fencing. He'd stopped to smoke, to joke, to promise that someday they'd be rich enough to hire men for this kind of labor. Cole didn't complain. He just worked. By the time the final wire was tightened, May's hands were blistered and her shoulders burned. But the fence stood straight against the canyon wind. They sat on the wagon's tailgate, passing a warm canteen back and forth. The fence line stretched clean and tight behind them, a thin silver scar holding back the savage canyon beyond. "You're good at this," May Holloway admitted at last, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. "For a drifter," Cole gave a faint shrug, eyes roaming the valley. "Grew up on a ranch in Texas, before the fire took it." "Fire?" May asked. "Comanches," he said simply. "I was 12. He took another swallow of water. "Learned early? If you don't hold the line, the world takes what's yours." He turned toward her then, gaze sharp and unflinching. Elias forgot that. May stiffened. He went soft. Cole continued. "Thought money could buy safety. Borrowed from men like Silas Crow because he wanted the easy road." "He wanted a better life for us," May snapped, though the words lacked their old strength. "He wanted to build something that lasted." "He built a house of cards," Cole said harshly, "and left you standing under it when it collapsed." May rose to her feet, anger flashing. "Don't speak ill of him. You didn't know him like I did." "I knew him before you," Cole replied. "I knew the man who—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Never mind." "Tell me," May demanded. "You keep circling it. Tell me what he did." For a moment, Cole looked like he might speak. Then his eyes drifted past her, toward the distant house. "Check the ledger," he said quietly. "The what?" "The ranch ledger, 5 years back, the year he bought this place." Cole stood and walked toward the horses. "Look at the purchase entry. Look where the down payment came from." May stared after him. "How do you even know about our books?" "Just look, May." That evening passed in silence. Cole ate on the porch. May took her meal alone in the kitchen. When the plates were cleared, she retreated to the small study. Dust coated everything. Elias's filing system had always been chaos, papers stacked in leaning towers, half-labeled folders shoved wherever there was room. She found the leather-bound ledger marked 1878, the year they arrived in Jericho Creek, the year their dream began. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The scent of old paper and tobacco rose, Elias's scent. She traced the columns slowly. Feed costs, vet bills, lumber. Then she found it. October 14th, 1878. Purchase of Double Bar S Ranch, $4,000. Below it, the source of funds. In Elias's neat looping script, personal savings. But something beneath it caught her eye. A faint scarring of ink, as if someone had tried to erase words that refused to disappear. May lifted the oil lamp closer. The flame wavered. Under personal savings, partially scratched out yet still readable, were initials. C.R. Cole Rourke, and beside it, in the margin, written in a shakier hand, nothing like Elias's usual script. One single word. Taken. May's breath caught. Taken. Not borrowed, not gifted. Taken. Her fingers turned the page. A folded sheet slipped free and fluttered to the floor. It wasn't a receipt. It was a wanted poster, Arizona territory, dated 6 years earlier. The drawing was crude, the man younger, the scar absent, but the eyes were unmistakable. Wanted, train robbery and murder, Cole Rourke. Black Spur Crew or reward, $5,000. Below his name were listed known associates, Marshall Boone, Elias Holloway. The ledger fell from May's hands. It hit the floor with a heavy crack that echoed through the house like a gunshot. Her husband wasn't just a rancher who'd made poor choices. He had been an outlaw, a fugitive. And the very marshal who'd come to evict her, eyes full of shame, had once ridden beside him. And Cole had been the leader. The man sleeping in her barn wasn't a savior. He was the man Elias had run from. The man Elias had stolen from to buy this land. May staggered back from the desk, one hand covering her mouth. Cole hadn't come to pay a debt. He had come to collect one, and now that the bank was settled, the ranch no longer belonged to Silas Crow. In Cole Rourke's mind, it belonged to him. Heavy boots sounded on the porch. The handle rattled. The knob didn't turn right away. It hesitated. May stood frozen in the center of the study, the thick leather ledger clutched to her chest like armor. With one shaking hand, she lifted the Winchester, the barrel trembling in the lamplight. The door creaked open. Cole Rourke filled the doorway. He had shed his work shirt and once again wore the long dust-colored duster, shadowing his broad frame as the firelight caught the edges of his face. His hat was pulled low, yet the lamplight caught the shine in his eyes. They weren't angry. They were exhausted, bone-deep exhausted. Cole Rourke saw the rifle aimed at his chest. Then his gaze drifted to the ledger clutched in May's hands. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't tense. He simply leaned back against the doorframe and folded his arms. "So," he said quietly, "you found the entry." There was no surprise in his voice at all. "You're a thief," May whispered, the accusation snagging in her throat. "You and Elias, you robbed trains. You killed people." "We robbed the Union Pacific," Cole corrected evenly. "And I never killed anyone who wasn't trying to put a bullet through me first." "Elias never fired a shot," May shot back. "He didn't have the stomach for it. And he wrote, 'Taken' next to your name." She stumbled backward until her spine hit the bookshelf. "He stole your share. That's why you're here. You didn't pay the bank to save me. You paid it to buy back what was stolen from you." Cole stepped into the room. He moved like a predator, smooth, deliberate, never taking his eyes off her, never flinching from the rifle tracking his chest. He reached out, not for the gun, but for the lamp. He turned the wick lower. The light dimmed until the room sank into shadow. "Put the rifle down, May," he said softly. "If I meant you harm, you'd never have heard me on those steps." "Then why are you here?" she demanded, tears finally spilling free. "Why save the ranch if you hated him?" "Because he left me to rot." The venom in his voice made her gasp. 7 years ago, Cole went on, the Arizona job went bad. The posse closed in. We had a rendezvous point. Boone and I were on foot carrying the gold. Elias had the horses. He took a step closer, his jaw tightening. He heard the gunfire, panicked, rode off. He took the horses. He took the gold. He took my life. May's breath hitched. Boone and I split up. He made it back here, pinned on a badge, hid in plain sight. Cole's eyes darkened. I went to Yuma prison, 5 years breaking rocks under the sun, thinking every day about the man living free on my money. May felt the room tilt around her, the gentle husband who cried when a calf died, who read poetry by the fire, had been a coward, a traitor. "So you came for revenge," she whispered. "I came for my money," Cole said. "I tracked him here. I watched from the ridge 3 days, planned to ride down and put a bullet in him." He paused. "Then I saw the funeral procession. I saw you kneeling by a fresh grave." Something cracked in his expression. "I saw a woman fighting a war she couldn't win. I saw the banks circling you like buzzards. And I realized killing a dead man wouldn't bring peace, and stealing a widow's land wouldn't make me whole." "So you paid the debt," May said slowly, lowering the rifle. "It was your money anyway." Cole shrugged. "Elias bought this ranch with my share. In a way, I've owned it 5 years already. I just came to inspect the property." "And now?" May asked quietly. "The debt's cleared. The fence is fixed. What happens now, Cole?" He turned toward the window. Outside, the night pressed in, black, airless, without a single star. "Now," he said under his breath, "we deal with the fact that I'm not the only one who knows about the money." May frowned. "What do you mean?" "Silas Crow," Cole said. "Bankers don't foreclose over late payments alone. He's been circling this land for years." "He knows what?" she asked. "He knows Elias didn't spend it all. The take was $20,000. Elias paid $4 for this place. Even with bad seasons, there's still $10,000 unaccounted for." May's blood ran cold. "Crow thinks it's buried somewhere on the ranch. That's why he pushed the foreclosure. He didn't want the land for the Union Rail men." "He wanted to dig," May gasped. "The copper piping." "He told Boone to watch the piping," Cole said. "He needed an excuse to tear the house apart." He moved to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the curtain. "And when I walked into that bank and dumped $3,000 in gold on his desk, I confirmed his suspicions. He knows who I am. He knows the Black Spur crew might be stirring again." May swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" Fear finally drowned out her anger. Cole turned back toward her. He reached inside his duster and drew out the pearl-handled Colt .45. He thumbed the cylinder, spun it once. Click, click, click. "We don't do anything," he said quietly. "It's already started." "What?" Cole lunged. He wrapped an arm around May's waist and drove her hard to the floor. Crash! The window behind them exploded inward. Glass burst through the room as a bullet tore past, slamming into the far wall and shattering the framed portrait of Elias Holloway. May screamed, but Cole's hand clamped over her mouth as he dragged her behind the heavy oak desk. "Stay down," he hissed. His eyes burned with a terrifying focus. "They're here." Outside, hoofbeats thundered through the darkness. Men shouted, torches flared to life, their orange light flickering wildly across the ceiling like demons crawling along the walls. "Come out, Rourke," a voice bellowed from the yard. It wasn't Silas Crow. This voice was rougher, deeper, a hired gun. "We know you're in there. Crow pays better than the law. Give us the map to the gold, and we let the woman live." Cole glanced down at May. He brushed a shard of glass from her hair. The touch was strangely gentle for a man holding a loaded gun. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "You're a train robber," she breathed, her heart pounding against his chest. "I'm the only thing between you and them," he said. "Do you trust me?" May's gaze flicked to the shattered picture of her husband, then back to the scarred man shielding her body with his own. "Yes," she whispered. "Good." Cole rolled away from her and braced his pistol against the desk edge. "Cover your ears." The silence shattered, not with words, but with violence. The window blew inward again, spraying glass like diamonds in the lamplight. A bullet slammed into the wall inches from May's head. Before she could scream, Cole was already moving. He tackled her down as another shot ripped through the space where she'd been standing. Wood splintered. "Stay down," Cole ordered. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. He wasn't a ranch hand now. He was the outlaw the papers had written about. Outside, the night erupted. Hooves pounded the ground. Torches danced wildly. Shadows twisted across the walls. "Come out, Rourke," the voice shouted again. "Crow wants the map. Hand over the gold, and the woman walks." Cole checked the cylinder of his Colt. Then he looked at May and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face with a hand that had steadied a gun through 100 fights. "Do you trust me?" The question hung thick in the smoke-filled room. May looked at the scar on his cheek, then down at the rifle in her own hands. The man who had deceived her was now the only reason she was still breathing. "Yes," she said. "Good. Cover your ears." Cole rose into a crouch and fired. Bang! Bang! The shots were deafening inside the small room. A scream outside told them he hadn't missed. "Reload for me," Cole ordered, sliding a Remington pistol across the floor toward her. He moved to the kitchen doorway, firing into the darkness, drawing their shots away from her position. May's hands shook, but her resolve did not. She ejected the spent shells. Clink, clink, clink. Fresh cartridges slid home. She wasn't just a widow guarding memories anymore. She was fighting to survive. She pushed the pistol back toward him. "They're rushing the door," Cole shouted. The front door groaned under the impact of a battering ram. Wood cracked. Splinters flew. 2 men burst into the hallway, bandanas covering their faces. May lifted the Winchester. She didn't think. She reacted. She pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, bruising deep. The bullet went wide, but it forced the lead attacker to duck. That heartbeat was all Cole needed. He dropped the first man with a shot to the chest. The second spun and fled into the night, screaming as a bullet tore through his shoulder. "Back!" Cole roared, slamming the ruined door shut and shoving a heavy cabinet against it. Then the tactic changed. A heavy thud hit the roof. The sharp, oily stink of kerosene filled the air. "Fire," Cole said grimly. "They're burning us out." An orange glow flared beyond the kitchen window. Flames began licking up the dry timber walls. Heat surged instantly, thick, choking, merciless. "We have to move," Cole said, grabbing May's arm. "Out the back, into the mud. Go!" They burst through the back door and tumbled into the yard sucking mud. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick and treacherous. Behind them, the house roared as flames devoured the dry timbers like kindling. "There," a voice shouted from the barn. Bullets ripped into the earth, spraying mud around their boots. They dove behind the heavy wooden watering trough, the only cover left. Fire at their backs. Gunmen ahead. Cole checked his weapon. "I'm dry. 2 rounds left in the Remington." "I've got 3, May Holloway said, racking the Winchester. 5 shots, Cole muttered, wiping soot from his eyes. "Against 4 men. He looked at her. "I'm sorry, May. I brought this storm to your door." "You fixed my fence," she said, fear trembling in her voice amid the chaos. "You paid my debt. You're the only honest man I've known in 6 months." For one brief moment, the gunfire and flames seemed to fall away. Cole squeezed her hand. "When I stand, they'll aim for me. You run for the creek. Don't look back." "No!" May cried, gripping his arm. "Go!" Cole shouted, starting to rise. Crack! A gunshot split the night. But it didn't come from the barn. And it didn't come from Cole. It came from the ridge behind the attackers. One of the gunmen near the corral dropped hard into the mud. Crack! Crack! 2 more shots thundered from the darkness. Another attacker spun and fell, his torch slipping from his hand. What is that? May gasped. Cole peered over the trough. A slow, disbelieving grin spread across his face. That, he said quietly, is the law. Riding out of the shadows, silhouetted by the burning house, came Marshal Boone. He wasn't wearing his badge. He rode hard, rein still clinging to his coat, rifle braced in his hands, looking every bit the outlaw he once had been. Drop your guns. Boone's voice boomed like thunder. Unless you boys want to be buried in this mud. The remaining Pike's riders froze. Caught between the legend of Cole Rourke and the marshal himself, they let their weapons fall and raised their hands. Boone rode up beside the trough, his horse sidestepping nervously near the flames. He looked down at them. You're late, Cole said, standing and holstering his empty gun. Had to pay Silas Crow a visit first? Boone spat tobacco into the dirt. He's in a cell. Kidnapping, arson, and a handful more charges. Won't be foreclosing on anyone again. They turned as the ranch house gave a final groan. The roof collapsed inward, sparks exploding into the pale edge of dawn. May watched her home, nursery, memories, secrets, vanish into ash. She should have broken. But standing there, soaked in mud beside the man who had come back from the dead to save her, she felt strangely light. It's gone, Cole said softly. House is gone. Money's gone. Nothing left but smoke. May studied the valley as dawn spread gently across the land. The fence line stood straight. The cattle were safe. The house is gone, she said at last, turning to him. But the land's still here, and the barn's got a solid roof. Cole stared at her. You want to stay, after all this? I'm not leaving, May said firmly. I'll rebuild, but I can't do it alone. She met his gaze without flinching. I need a partner, someone who knows how to hold the line. Cole looked to Marshal Boone, then to the smoking ruins, then back to the woman who had fought beside him. He tipped his hat. I don't come cheap, ma'am. I know, May said, smiling for the first time in months. I expect you'll cost me everything I have. Then I'll start on the barn roof after breakfast, Cole replied. Smoke from the ruins drifted into the pale morning sky, mingling with clouds hanging over the distant Teton Range. A somber incense of a life burned away. Marshal Boone sat astride his horse, watching the two of them in the mud. He adjusted his hat, weariness etched across his face. But relief too. I'll haul these boys back to town, he said, gesturing to the bound riders slumped by the corral. And I'll make sure Crow's confession's inked before noon. He looked at Cole. As for you, Rourke, I suppose I didn't see you here. As far as the law's concerned, Cole Rourke died in Arizona 5 years ago. The man standing here is just a drifter who helped a widow survive a fire. Cole nodded slowly. Don't make me regret it, Boone warned. Then the marshal tipped his hat to May and turned his horse toward town. He's a hard man, May, but he's solid. You could have done worse. I know, Boone, she said softly. I know. With a sharp whistle, Marshal Boone gathered the prisoners. Hooves carried them off toward town, the sound fading until only the crackle of cooling timbers remained. And the lonely morning call of a meadowlark drifting across the valley. May walked toward the smoldering ruin that had once been her parlor. Heat still pulsed from the stone chimney, the only thing left standing. She nudged a blackened board with the toe of her boot. It's all gone. she whispered. The furniture, the clothes, the ledger. The ledger needed to burn, Cole Rourke said, stepping beside her. He removed his hat, the morning sun catching the gray at his temples. The lies Elias wrote in there, they don't matter now. You start fresh today. Fresh. May let out a brittle laugh. I've got a barn, a herd of cattle, $3 to my name, and a hired hand I can't afford. Cole reached into his pocket and drew out a single gold coin, the last one from the sack he'd dropped on Silas Crow's desk. He must have kept it for luck. He flipped it into the air. Gold flashed in the sunlight before he caught it. I didn't come here for the money, May, he said, voice rough. I told myself I did. Told myself I wanted what Elias took. But when I saw you standing on that porch, rifle raised against the whole world, I realized I was searching for something else. What? She asked quietly. A reason to stop running. He walked to where the porch steps had once stood. Kneeling in the ash, he dug with his gloved hands. After a moment, he pulled free a warped metal tin box, blackened, but still sealed. May's breath caught. Cole pried it open with his knife. Inside, the paper money had turned to dust, but the silver pocket watch remained. Elias's watch, tarnished yet whole. Cole held it out. You could sell this. Buy lumber, glass for the windows. May took it carefully. It was the last piece of her husband she had left. She closed her fingers around the cold metal, then lifted her eyes to the valley. The creek shimmered like a silver ribbon. The cattle grazed calmly behind the new fence Cole had built. The land was still breathing. She slipped the watch into her pocket. No, she said firmly. We won't sell it. We'll keep it. To remind us the past is heavy, but we don't have to carry it alone. She turned to him and took his hand. His palm was rough as bark, scarred by years of labor, but his grip was warm and steady. You said you're a carpenter, Mr. Rourke. I've built a thing or two, he said with a faint smirk. Then let's build a new house, May said, pointing toward a rise overlooking the valley, away from the shadows of the old foundation. Up there, where the sun hits first. Cole studied the hill. Then the woman who had lost everything and yet still stood unbroken. That'll take a lot of timber, he said, and a lot of time. We have time, May replied, resting her head against his shoulder. All the time in the world. Cole Rourke, the outlaw who had ridden into town to settle a score, looked toward the horizon. For the first time, he didn't see an escape route. He saw a home. All right then, he said, settling his hat back in place. I'll go hitch the team. They walked together toward the barn, leaving the ashes behind, ready to build a life this time rooted in truth. And on the high plains of Wyoming, among the remnants of betrayal and fire, May Holloway and Cole Rourke found something far more valuable than the gold that was never unearthed. They found a future. The bank couldn't take their spirit. The flames couldn't burn their bond. In the Wild West, survival wasn't about being the fastest draw. It was about knowing who to trust when everything was on the line. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal /disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting, as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.